got it.
Yeah.
I just hit it.
Okay. I got you back.
All right, here we go.
Hi, welcome back to another edition of Relatable. I am your host, Stephanie Michelle. This is the show where we talk about exceptional human encounters, the people that make them happen and the actions it takes to create them. And yes, I have changed it up a little bit. I'm on the other side. I'm usually sitting over there, but I just felt like changing things up. So when we talk about exceptional human encounters, like one of the main things that makes these happen, these like extraordinary situations that actually come out of pretty ordinary situations that just become really meaningful to us. One of the main ingredients is just being curious, just being curious to like step into something new. And when I think about like how all the ways that we can measure growth, really, so being courageous and curious requires us to grow, right? And we measure physical growth. Like you probably all have a memory where you were lined up against a wall somewhere and we were measuring out how tall you were growing as a child. But we don't have a lot of ways to measure emotional growth or spiritual growth. So I was like really reflecting on that for a couple reasons that you're going to find out in a couple minutes here. And so I started thinking, we do vision boards to say, this is what we want. Well, wouldn't it be nice to do a vision board that just showed all of these moments in time where you really you grew, you had an experience and you learned from it, and to be able to reflect and look at it and go, I did that. I had that moment and I overcame it. So I'm proposing a new type of vision board around growth. Of course, we can always journal and go back and revisit a journal to see like, yeah, I've experienced some growth here. And of course, my favorite is going to be reflecting with somebody that knows you well, that like watched you go through some small hurts or some battles and saw you come out on the other side in a better way. It's always nice to have that kind of friend that can say, yeah, I see you, or a family member that helps you see that you've grown, you got this, you've done something. This is just another reason why it's such a high value experience to go through life with somebody that really knows you, to really invest in relationships. People can tell you on the surface that you're amazing, but it always feels better when someone says it that's like really has seen you and you let them see you. So if you're watching via chat, here's something to ponder on right now and share if you feel comfortable. What do you need to revisit and proudly proclaim, I did that, I got this, and yes, I'm amazing. If you don't feel comfortable sharing it in chat, call somebody and revisit the things that have made you grow. Speaking about reclaiming, I'm wearing another outfit by Ava Varro, and I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to try to move up and maybe stand up. It's a horse. It's like an awesome, amazing Trojan horse. And I know if you watch the show, you've heard me talk about being a workhorse, because I have a very weird relationship with doing. The constant to-do list and not being. And I've realized rightly, like, I can be both, like I can have a better relationship with doing and be as well. And when I saw this horse on this tunic, I was like, yeah, I love horses. They're powerful animals. Like I'm reclaiming the horse in a positive way in my life. So Ava Varro, remember, go to her website. It's avavarro.com, and Relate20 is a promo code to get 20% off so you can have an outfit like this. And since last week, there's a couple things that have really helped me acknowledge my own growth. Two things in particular. So I took last week's social challenge, and I don't know if you guys were watching, but there was a moment with my guests where you might have saw me go, oh, what she just said was for me. I totally needed to hear that. I've found myself really doing a lot of negative talk lately, just lots of just toxic negative words that I've said to myself in front of the mirror, after a long day's work. I just was in that cycle. And so I took the challenge, and the challenge was to set an alarm 3 times a day and say 3 positive things to yourself, so positive affirmations. And I really needed that challenge. I can't even tell you how much I needed it. My alarm's going off at 9 a.m., 3 p.m., and 9 p.m. And at first it was like super awkward, like, oh my God, what am I going to say about myself? And now I'm just like mastering that challenge. And I needed that. I feel differently it's just energy that I really appreciated and needed. So I really encourage people to take it. And if you do, let me know. And the second thing that's really changed and shifted for me, and I've been in this process for a couple weeks now, is I got to read my guest today's book called Facing the Truth of Your Life. Look at this colorful cover. I love it. And it is exactly that. This book, and we're going to talk so much more about it with my guest, but this book for me was a much needed reminder of how far I've come and how much growth I've done. And it actually gave me a loving space to look at the chapters or look at the topics that still need a little work on, and love myself through that, and be willing to go back to it, and be willing to bookmark it and say, I can handle this piece right now, and I feel good about that, and I'm going to come back and do more work on this. So we're going to dive in and talk more about this awesome book that just has given me so much energy, and I hope you can see it, feel it, because I'm feeling it. So my guest today, his name is Merle Yost. He is a full-time writer, workshop leader, and consultant. He retired from private practice of psychotherapy after 25 years. He now lectures, consults to help people make sense out of their lives and the pain that they are often in so they can move forward. With over 35 years of personal and professional work, Merle has taken the summary of his experience and training and used it to help others. Merle's own healing journey informed deep compassion for the emotional pain people experience, as well as his profound belief in the possibilities of healing and claiming one's life. Yes. Yeah. I could have wrote that because that's how I'm feeling about it.
Well, good. I'm glad.
I felt that after we talked and after reading the book. I'm like, yes. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
I got to rant, kind of share what's on my mind, kind of unload on everybody. So I love asking the guests and giving them the same opportunity. So what's pulling your attention right now before we get into today's talk? Like, is there anything that you're like, I feel like I need to share this?
The book, as you mentioned, I retired from private practice about 4 years ago, almost 5 now, I think, 4 years. And I've been on a journey. I describe it as kind of being like my Scott Bakula quantum leap experience, and I keep getting placed down into these new places, and I'm there to touch somebody's life really profoundly. And that's happened now like 3 times, and I'm like wondering, and I feel like that next leap is coming, and I'm not sure where I'm going to land. So that's preoccupying me a lot at this point. So.
But isn't that part of life? Is like it's being okay with not really knowing and just like letting it surprise you, I guess.
Well, yeah, but this is a big change. It's not like just moving down the street. I went from Oakland to Australia briefly, to Mexico, and then to San Diego. Now I'm up just outside of Santa Barbara, and now who knows where next? Maybe LA, maybe somewhere else completely. Yeah. So it's just, there's a part of me that misses the stability.
Yeah.
And so there's an old S question from Werner Erhard that said, what have you been unwilling to give up that if you gave it up would make your life work?
That's the book. I remember reading that.
It's in there.
Yeah.
The answer to when I asked myself that last time was security.
Yeah. I'm relating to that. I switched sides today for a reason, because I do get so attached to structure. So I often say, okay, I need a foundation, and then I can be creative. Like I need a clean desk, and then I can, write. And so I create procedure or process or foundational, this is how I'm doing things. And that helps me sometimes to be expansive, but I'm also finding like, oh, well, maybe that's kind of fringing upon being creative too. Like you're kind of set here, and let's just try it differently. If it's terrible, I'll go back to the other side. It's not a big thing. So I'm experiencing myself with the willingness to try something new.
Good. Well, if you never try anything new, then you just stay in the same rut.
Right. Right.
And nothing ever changes. So take a walk.
Take a walk, exactly. All right. Well, so I love this book. I loved it. I mean, we could go through chapter to chapter, and I can tell you why it was important to me. Why was it important to you to write? This is not your first book. This is your 6th book.
It's my 6th book, yes. This is the most personal book.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have thought the last one on gynecomastia was, but it really wasn't comparatively. I had a pretty awful childhood. actually. And it took a lot of work, 17 years of individual psychotherapy, 2 years of a really intense professional training program, 20 plus years of consultation, and endless other things that I've done, a lot of books that I've read and worked through as well. And so at the end of my period of doing private practice, I knew that my next phase in life was going to be about teaching. And this book was really my gift back to my profession, in the sense that so many clients get stuck in therapy and they don't know why they're there or what they're doing. And the point of this book was to unstick them. Yeah. And I gave this as a gift to psychotherapists to give their clients, to say, well, if you don't know why you're here or what's going on, you don't know what to talk about, read this book. It will give you something to talk about in therapy, and it'll give you a rationale for why you're there and what the outcome can be and should be.
Yeah, it is kind of a textbook. I mean, it really covers so many different areas of self-growth, or of growth, of self-discovery and self-help, and it covers it in a way of like, okay, here's maybe here's a place where you can identify with your stuff, but here's other people too. So it was it's inclusive. And I think that inclusion is helpful to reflect on, to understand who you are in the reflection of other people too. So, well, I don't know if that was understand. I feel like that was kind of
my shorthand version of the book is the book explains how you became you.
Yeah.
Why that's not good, and what
Some of it's good.
and what you can do about that.
Yeah.
So that really is. So you have to undo the bad stuff.
Yeah.
But most people don't even know the bad stuff is there.
Yeah.
And this helps bring into light why you're stuck, why you can't stay in a relationship, or why you can't stay in a job, or why you can't figure out who you are, or what you want to do. It's in the book. It'll help you figure that out.
A lot of how that plays out in the book, and how I feel it's relevant to today, is so I see a lot of people via social media taking somebody else's words and saying, this is what I believe, and just being very, not a lot of time to really reflect on, like, where did it come from? We've talked a lot about this on the show. Are these my own words? Is this aligned to my values and beliefs? So none of that's happening. It's just fast, like, okay, this is the hot new news, or this is the hot new thing, the trend, and I'm just gonna, it's mine now. And there's a lot of fallout and damage from that. So I like the questions that are at the end of some of these chapters in here about really stepping back and going, where did you get that information? Is that truly, how do you feel about that information? Doing the body checks to go, well, when this question is proposed to you, is it really, how does it feel to you? Is that really yours? Does that align to it? Do you know what your values and beliefs are? All of this stuff.
Most people don't. They've just downloaded the values from their parents and their family and their church or their community, and they just assume that's how the world works and don't understand that they were programmed. I mean, the clinical word is socialized, but we all understand what being programmed means. And the whole point of this is to help you understand how you were programmed, so you can get to choose whether you like that programming or not.
Exactly. And I'm glad that you said that, because by no means, and I won't speak for you, but I don't think you're saying this, and I definitely am not saying this. Like, the book is not to try to get you to see something completely different than some of the things that you've already adapted as your own. It's just to see, okay, are these your things? And maybe you will go back and go, yep, that's perfectly fine. That works. This religion, this way of doing things, that's exactly aligned with who I am. And I'm so glad that I checked in. And that check-in is where the value is.
Yeah, the value is owning who you are. Yeah. But if you own it because you've chosen it, as opposed to it was given to you, those are two very different things. Because we get given a lot growing up. And some of it's good, a lot of it's not.
I instantly think of hand-me-downs.
Exactly. And so
your older sister, and you have an older sibling, you're like,
you have to chew up all of that old stuff and keep that which works and discard that which doesn't. Yeah. It changes your life.
Yes. So what's the first book that you wrote?
The first three were co-authored with my best friend at the time, Bruce Hyland. The first one was a business bestseller called Reflections for Managers. It's actually a very solid book on how to be a manager, not manage spreadsheets, but actually managing people. what a concept. And it did really well. We had a big fight with the publisher of the name. We wanted to call it a survival guide for managers, but McGraw-Hill in New York, who picked it up, there's an interesting story behind that, just briefly, is that we were complete unknowns. We wrote a book proposal and sent it out to 40 publishers, got 39 rejections, and one yes was McGraw-Hill in New York.
Wow.
So, supposed to be.
Say yes, let's have it be a big one.
And so, but they saw us as these new age kind of guys in California and didn't really get that this wasn't that at all. And so they wanted to call it Meditations for Managers. And he said, and this was in 1993. I said, there's no way you're ever going to sell a book called Meditations for Managers. So we compromised on Reflections for Managers.
Yeah.
So. But so the first two were on how to be a manager. The third one's how to be a good employee.
Yeah. That's neat, and both of those are needed. So I'm just going to dive into some of the things that I pulled out that I found inspiration, context, reflection, whatever you want to say, that I.
Great.
Yeah, that I thought, oh, I've never heard that expressed that
way. Good,
way.
I like that.
Yeah. So the first one is religious acts as ego.
Yeah. I guess the simple way to explain that is that we grow up, we hopefully develop a sense of self. And it starts to solidify around 3, or at least it comes into focus. Up until about 3, you're kind of going, and so that's why mom and dad are really there to hold you and to merge with you to some degree. And so, but at 3, you really start, if all things go well, and start building on that. But some people, because their family was too intrusive, because they didn't allow them to have the child's own sense of being, or they were so abusive, or 100 other reasons, never develop a sense of self. It never coalesces. Either they just don't build one at all because they were too intruded upon, or they just never coalesce, because the way you build a sense of self is by reflecting back to the child, saying, oh, you look really sad. That's a really important part of the child, taking the external and turning it internal and making that sense of self. Well, if this doesn't happen along the way, or it becomes too fractured or damaged, it's very common for people to download their religion, their politic, some identity, so that they take that on as a structure that they have so that they can function in the world, because without it, they're lost. And so it's problematic, because not that I'm actually very pro-spirituality. I'm not terribly pro-religion, but I'm very pro-spirituality.
We're aligned on that.
And so if you take on the religion and then that becomes your identity, the problem is that if somebody attacks the religion, or something says something critical about it, that becomes a personal attack upon you. You have no perspective. You have no ability to step back and look to say, well, this is good, that's not good, this is there's some truth in there, or there's shades of gray. And so it becomes very personal, and then they will tend to attack back because their very existence is threatened.
Yeah.
So it's really, and people do that in the 12-step as well, is that if they don't have a sufficient characterological structure or sense of self, that they go into recovery, and the way they stay in recovery is to take on the 12-step as their identity. So we can do that with our sports team. We can do that with all sorts of things. I mean, a classic one for women is to take on the role of mother. Their whole identity is tied up in being a mother. There is no other identity, and anything that threatens that identity is bad. And then they're lost when the kids go, and so they have to find another way to get that fulfilled. And so we have a bad habit of taking things out there and making them us, instead of figuring out who we are. And the task of this lifetime is to figure out who you are. That's where the joy, that's where the work, but that's where the payoff lies.
Yeah. Just want to stop right there and pause. Like, it's just so true. I can't imagine, I just can't imagine a God that wouldn't encourage that. You know, so when we talk, there seems to be, I'm not anti-traditional, okay? I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but there seems to be some weird divide in, okay, you have to accept every part of this religion, and don't challenge it. Don't, this is what it is. Take it by the person that's like leading the sermon at the pulpit. Take every word that they say and take it as your own. And I just I see God as more expansive than that. That I see that he, she, it, they, whatever it is, like I see it. I can't define what that is, and I see it as love, and would want a person to find who they are so they can live their best life in the way that they were meant to be. And so that requires some curiosity, that requires challenging. And again, we've already said this, it doesn't mean that you're going to challenge it and everything's going to change. It could be that you just refine what you already know is true or what you feel is true. But I think that growth is a natural order of things, and it goes hand in hand with God and spirituality.
It can. Unfortunately, there are many people who are determined not to grow.
I know that. I've experienced that.
I mean, I have family members who, my extended families from Southern Illinois, who never left the county that they grew up in. Yeah. I mean, their entire life. Yeah. It just never occurred to them that they needed to leave. And that's sort of a metaphor for this is what I downloaded. This is who I am. I don't need to question. I don't want to go anything outside of those boundaries because that might be scary.
Yeah.
And if you're not scared once in a while, you're not doing anything.
Right. and I go back to that's just that visual measurement of how we physically grow, right? Can you imagine if as you were growing, someone was like weighting you down? No, you can't grow. You can't grow taller. You can't do that. Emotional growth has to feel as painful if you're not allowing it to happen. It is a natural order of things to allow yourself to evolve. I just can't. I feel that with every part of me.
I think one of the quotes I used in the book is one of my favorite movies, The Never-Ending Story. There's a great quote in there where she said, "It's got to hurt if it's going to heal."
Yeah.
And if there's no pain involved, you're limiting your growth possibilities. I've seen people who have decided they're enlightened, but they've arranged their whole life so that they have no pain.
Yeah.
They have no discomfort. There's no threat to their reality. So that just to me sounds like narcissism, because life, you can't go along without stubbing your toe occasionally. Yeah. That's how we grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. So another thing that I pulled out for funny reasons, I guess, but maybe some serious ones too that I won't share and out anybody in my life, is this term emotional incest. So I am 100% certain that I've dated a lot of mommy's boys, and there was some weird stuff going on between the mom and the son that was affecting our ability to have a thriving, healthy relationship. And I sought them out. So I know there's some work here that, and I've done some of this work, but reading this book, it's like, maybe some more. But I've definitely dated the mama's boy that had this weird something, and I've never heard it described as this. So can you tell me in your own words, what is emotional incest?
Emotional incest. I think it's actually the most undiagnosed, untreated issue in our society, if not world. There are cultures who've made their entire culture about this. When you think of the Italian man and being a mama's boy, I mean, that's just, and it's true in Latin America, it's true in a whole lot of cultures. But in this country, it takes a different look, but it's the same thing in that, I'll do the short version of this story, or at least I'll attempt to. So when we were an agrarian society, everybody was there together, mom, dad, the kids, and they were all one unit. But when we became an industrial society, dad went off to work and the kids were home with mom. And so that changed the whole dynamic of what was going on. So over time, dad plays less and less of a role in terms of the parent, and the mom becomes the whole picture. And so mom is not getting her needs met because dad isn't there. And so she has this wonderful, adorable baby boy who is the love of her life and who loves her completely. And so she's getting those psychosexual needs met via this little boy. And instead of backing off, because that first 18 months, 2 years of merger is so delicious, but it needs to stop because the boy has to be able to form that sense of self. And if mom is in there, and he learns very early on that the way to keep mom happy is to give mom what mom wants. And that's whatever mom wants, mom gets. And so consequently, he never develops a sense of self. And so he may grow up because he's been intruded upon because she's there. And she's become the whole, he's been told to be loved means to make mom happy, to give her what she needs. So he grows up, assuming he's straight, then so he can go out there and he's attracted to women, and as long as there's a high sexual intensity, he's great. He's fun, he's charming, he knows exactly how to meet all of your needs because he knows women. But the moment that the sexual heat starts to die down, all of a sudden he's out of there. Because in his mind, whether he realizes or not, is that to be loved means to be devoured by the other, and he's starting to suffocate, and he doesn't even know consciously this is going on. He's just gone and on to the next one where there's more sexual juice, where he can stay on that erotic edge and everything's fine. So this doesn't just happen between mothers and sons. It happens between mothers and daughters. It happens between fathers and daughters. I mean, this is a common phenomena, but the most common is mother-daughter, mother-son. And so, and it shows up over and over. And so then these pair get married, and then the sexual heat dies down and he's feeling overwhelmed, so he checks out, and so mom has this baby boy, and the cycle starts over again. And it's really epidemic in our society, and it's really problematic.
Yeah. I think after this chapter where you talk about this, you have a great chapter on, the 5 essential things that you should do or can't to raise children. And I don't have children, so I almost skipped over that chapter, but I'm glad that I didn't.
No, it's an
important chapter because what I put in place, I read it with the contents of children, but then I read it in the contents of something that I love, like the show or, what I'm building, and went, sometimes, so where I caught myself is like, sometimes I'm so concentrated on the work of everything that I'm not loving this project, this thing that I chose to love.
Not really enjoying it.
Yeah. So there was some really helpful things there of like, just here's some 5 guidelines to keep you in check on raising children.
Absolutely true, and I think it's really useful. And one of those was not to emotionally incest your child. But I think I actually saw it as, for most people, it's going to be about, well, did I get this in my childhood?
Yeah.
There's some benchmarks there to say, this is why I can't figure out how to problem solve, because my parents always came in, helicopter parent, and solved all the problems, so I never learned how to problem solve, so I don't know how to be in the world.
Yeah.
And I
read it that way too.
It's just, because a lot of us don't have kids, and that's okay. But there's always new old stuff showing up.
Right.
And so the more awareness you have, the more things that come. And the nice part is that the more work you do on yourself, because the work never stops, is that you actually have more tools and you can work through things easier, and it doesn't become this life-shattering event that it felt like in the beginning. So
I'm so glad that you used that word, because that was a big realization in reading the book. It's like, I have that tool. Like, I forgot about that tool. Like, I have that tool. And I needed to read this right now. It was very timely. To me, it was timely connecting with you and talking with you and reading it, but just the reminder of like, yes to this, you have this, and now look, here's this new thing that you might want to check in with, but remember, you still have these tools that you can bring into this. So it was just great. It was honestly just great. I can't say that enough. And I loved, so this is not for the faint at heart. If you haven't done any work for yourself, I mean, you can go either way. Like, if you want to just dive in, this is a good place to start. And if you have done a lot of work and you think like, oh, well, what possibly could I learn? I think this is a good book to read if you're in that stage. So where you're like, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I can learn. You can always recheck in with yourself. And I think this is
great if you're in therapy.
Yeah.
It's going to give you a lot more to talk about in therapy.
Definitely. And I liked how you ended it. That why of all of this, that having this ability to see yourself in a very truthful way also gives you the ability to connect with other people, and you're reminded like how precious life is, how we really are all alike, and we're connected to each other, and it's important that we need to remind ourselves that we're connected. We've got some serious things right now that are happening in the world, and like we need connection. We need to come together and let everybody's voice be heard to say, I don't want to see our planet be destroyed. I don't want to see these horrible things, happen. So I like that you ended it with "We Are Family."
It's a nice positive ending, but that really is the point. I mean, as long as we're stuck in our childhood reality, as long as we have all those wounds from childhood where we get triggered and the 6-year-old shows up or the 14-year-old shows up or the 23-year-old shows up and we're not authentically ourselves, then we can't have real empathy or real compassion. And so consequently, once you actually work through enough of those wounds that you can respond as opposed to react to everything, then you have the possibility of being in a relationship.
Yeah.
And that changes everything.
And it's just harm reduction, right? So like dealing with your own life and the truths of your life and being able to face that with less harm and intentionally harmful things being done to yourself, then you can reflect with other people and take harm out of the equation or diminish the effects of harm.
Well, and understand that harming another person is harming ourselves. And that, what's the old expression, if one man's free, then no one is. And not free, I should say. If one man is not free, then no one is. And so, but it's true. Our task is not only to alleviate our own suffering, but to alleviate everyone's suffering. Why should we all not rise up together, as opposed to some people here and some people there, which we've become way too accustomed to.
Yeah, or just I feel humans are very good at accelerating the pace of darkness and fear. We've gotten phenomenal. I mean, we are like the pro masters of that acceleration, and it's massive when I think about it. Like I can just kind of see a black dark cloud, but how you fight against that or diminish that darkness is this work. Is loving yourself, being real with yourself, being real with other people, making those connections, going, yep, I see the darkness, but I'm gonna go through it, even if it's tough. And I might have to stop. I might have to stop on a step and just kind of sit there for a little bit,
Maybe you'll work on this and then come back to the book.
And you, however that progress is, it's totally fine. Like you can vacation from all of the work for a while and then come back to it. However it is, but just the willingness to go, yes, I see the darkness and it's tough and it's there, but if I'm going to do anything about it, I have to do something good for myself, and I have to be able to connect with other people and care about their existence and be in loving relationships and have joyful experiences. So, but it's hard to do that without acknowledging some of the truths of like what kind of darkness are you generating? Like where is your stuff coming from?
Yeah, and where are your blind spots? And this is really a big part of this is finding your blind spots, because you don't know they're not there until somebody points them out and show them to you. So
definitely,
this is going to put a big mirror on those blind spots.
Definitely. Mine, but the ones I'm dealing with the most, I'm just going to end it with this before I ask Merle the last question. Definitely trust issues. I got to deal with my trust issues. That's what came out of it the most. Trusting self, trusting other people. Yeah, that's a whole nother show.
It is. We can talk about that again.
Yeah, we can lunch and talk about that. Anyhow, so last thing before we move on to a couple other things that we get to do together in our time is there anything that you have coming up that you want to share that this work is leading you to do, or things that you're excited about?
Yes, as we mentioned before, I stopped doing private practice, but I haven't stopped doing psychotherapy. So there are two primary things that I do at this point. One is I do something called an intensive. Somebody comes to see me for 5 consecutive days, and I work with them for 10 hours over those 5 days, and we go after whatever the problem is. It's quite intense, it's quite profound, and life-changing for people. But the other major thing I'm doing at this moment is I do a workshop called Unspoken Boundaries. And this workshop is about these energetic boundaries that we have with each other. We were just talking about emotional incest. Well, that's about merging. Mm-hmm. And so, but we get trained to merge all the time. That child who doesn't have a strong sense of self or any sense of self, who's in a difficult household or just scared, will learn how to feel around the corner to take the temperature to see whether mom and dad are okay, if that room is safe. So we learn how to abandon ourselves in order to know what's going on. But the truth is that's the absolute worst thing we can do. And the workshop Unspoken Boundaries is about teaching people about their energetic boundary, how to keep people out, how to stay in, and because the juice is at the contact. The moment that you merge, you lose you because you're over there. And the only way you can stay alive in life and in the relationship is to stay inside of your bubble. And that's a word I use a lot. And so this workshop, Unspoken Boundaries, is about teaching people some real tools to push people out of their bubble, to keep their boundary clear, to clean it up if there's any problems. It's a very intense full-day workshop with a lot of deep processing where you get in touch with your own deficits around holding those boundaries. And it's a really life-changing experience.
And when's the next one?
The next one is actually in Oakland this Sunday, and there'll be ones coming up in LA in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay. And we will be sharing all of Merle's information so you can find out more information about those workshops.
Great. Thank you.
We'll do that. Okay. So the next thing that we get to do together.
All right.
This is kind of fun. Can be fun. Can be a little vulnerable, but in a fun way. So we have these dice. And one of them has all of our senses on it, plus body language. And the other one, you're like, this could be fun. Actually, I do think that these would be a lovely, intimate little tool to play with, but that's another show.
It's like a good couples game.
It's a total good couples game. And so the other one is meant to just inspire like some conversation or something to happen around that sense. So we're either going to bring up memories tied to a sense, or use it to get to know each other more, or talk about wishful things like And so what's on this he says things like, do this mean what? So like in relation to someone making a funny face, what does this mean? Just
Okay.
wild swap, something we might do for 60 seconds, act it out, this kind of thing. Sometimes, because what I like about these dice is just like relating, there are no real rules to it, that we use this one more, or it's just meant to go with our intuition and go, I think I want to talk about this, okay? So sometimes we ignore this, but we'll see what happens. Because it's easier to just zero in on, oh yeah, I want to talk about this, than to try to do it in the context of this one. It is a little bit. So I know Merle has a very playful side, so who knows where this is going to go. And that's also what's happening with the dice, is it's like always about like, where are we right now? Because this puts us right now,
the spontaneity of the moment,
on the couch going, okay, what are we going to talk about? Like last week, I'm going to make Dee blush over there. Last week, my guest and I told really disgusting story. We had a very similar disgusting story around sin or something we saw. And it was a very similar story, and it was not good. It was not good. It's not something I need to hear. Okay. So we got here, and we got dare.
That's here?
Here. Well, it's in here.
Oh, it's in hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hearing. So our sense of hearing and a dare. So what kind of comes up for me is, anyone ever dared you to, I don't know, to sing something that you didn't want to sing? Or what would be a good thing to talk about here? What are you feeling? Like when you think of like memories relating and memories tied to something that you hear, what comes up?
I can tell you immediately what came up. I don't know. It's a very Merle kind of way to go.
But let's go there.
Well, my specialty is men who were sexually abused as children. Mm-hmm. And so what immediately came up was all of the guys who were traumatized, and I certainly had my own experience of this, and is listening to your parents have sex, and how that so intrudes upon their sexuality. There's a new show on Netflix called Sex Education, mm-hmm. and he's listening to his mother have this sex constantly, mm-hmm. his teenage boy. And this is, as far as I'm concerned, it's incest. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's forcing her sexuality onto him. And this is, children should not be party to their parents' sex. They could be aware that their parents have sex or that they're intimate, but hearing, seeing, and parents seem to think that that's just okay for kids to have that. And I can tell you, it's an incredibly traumatizing experience. And I've worked with so many men that 20, 30, 40 years later had to work through that so that they could sexually function in a normal way. And
the memory was so strong.
Well, yeah, because it was their first erotic turn on.
Yeah.
It's like, so then you wonder why they're a voyeur.
Yeah.
Because that first erotic awakening is often where your sexual life comes. It becomes a fetish or a sexual turn on. And so consequently, depending upon who it is and the relationship with their parents and blah, 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 it's get quite complicated. But anyway, I said, that's where my mind goes.
I can imagine. So I'm curious about this. I I can imagine that that's a hard thing to come up because we're not told that you should have any trauma around hearing your parents having sex. Like it's just not, doesn't seem like it's an acceptable.
Most people don't even want to acknowledge that their parents had sex, especially their mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, she had 12 kids, but she was a virgin in his mother's eyes. So.
Right. I got it.
So we're a shame-based society around sex, and everything around sex is dirty. It's shame-based. It's eroticized shame is the absolute currency of sex in our culture and much of the world. And until you can work through that or come to terms with that, you're in this very weird dance that really makes sex difficult, almost impossible.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to let you go with the next one because we're obviously going to go a lot deeper than my tell me a gross story. Like, that was great. I love shares like that. I mean, it wasn't what I was thinking, but I know somebody is going to listen to that and go, oh, I can relate to that. I understand that. I've never thought about that. I need to think about that.
Yeah, people don't, your first sexual experience sets the tone. And if you were sexually abused at 5, you're psychosexually stuck at the age of 5 until you work through that. So you may be a 40-year-old, but you're having sex as a 5-year-old.
Now that brings up something for me. I've experienced myself, and I've been in intimate relationships with someone, or with men, someone, you know, someone. Let's just be as generic as we can get. Men.
That's not narrowing it down too much.
Yeah. Mostly boys that were maybe trying to be men. I don't know.
Boys in men's bodies.
Yeah, boys in men's bodies. But I've both experienced it and witnessed this thing where something gets triggered, and I immediately. How I've experienced it is I immediately find myself at 11 or 12, and I've had to connect to whatever it was that thing that created that core damage. But I've actually physically felt myself regressing to the moment that caused the core damage. And I've watched it happen with other people, particularly in intimate relationships where something was triggered. And then now this man that I'm dating is now a 9-year-old boy in front of me, you know, so.
All the time.
Yeah.
And the official statistics are 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 3 girls are sexually abused. I believe, from having worked in this field for so long, the reality is 1 in 2 girls and 1 in 3 boys. And so boys are dramatically underreported. Boys are not allowed to be a victim. For a male to say he's a victim means he's no longer a male. It means sacrificing his manhood. And we have to change that. And so we have all these guys. I don't believe in sexual addiction. I think it's absolute nonsense. What we have is unresolved sexual trauma, and they stay out there on the edge of eroticized shame so they don't have to dip into the bad part. I've worked with hundreds of guys, and once they deal with the sexual trauma, the compulsivity goes away. So we're treating the symptom and shaming people about their sexuality instead of treating the underlying problem and resolving it.
Shame is not a powerful tool.
It's ubiquitous.
Yeah, it's tough. All right, I'm going to let you, whatever comes up from Merle, that's what we're talking about in this one. I'm not even going to try, because I think you're in the meaningful zone right now. All right, we got scent.
Oh.
And we could swap, and we got the other dice is swap. So it's like swapping scent. Sometimes I just want to go, what do you smell?
You'll never smell anything on me. I live in an unscented world. I'm allergic to colognes.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of
They make me sneeze, and often I've had actually guys stop dating me because I couldn't tolerate their cologne. And their whole identity was tied up in smelling this way. I'm like, really? Okay, that tells me a lot. But I don't know, smell is one of our strongest things that will bring back memories.
Yes.
And so it's really intense. And so when people don't even understand what their houses smell like. When you walk in, certain houses have Mom's house was always like that. There's a smell that you're always going to encounter when you wander in there. And so whenever you come across something like that, it takes you back to that moment in time. This is a painful memory, but probably the most painful one for me is that My ex and I had kind of an adopted son. There's no other way for me to describe him. He was never formally adopted, but he killed himself at 35. And I got the honor of cleaning up that mess and going into his place where his body had been for a month and deteriorating. And that smell, that every time I come across something that reminds me of that smell, takes me right back
Yeah, I can imagine.
to walking into his apartment and what I encountered. So,
Yeah, it's a very powerful, triggering sense that we have that, yeah, you immediately smell something and you're right there.
and you're right there in that moment. It takes you back.
Good or bad.
Yeah. Olfactory is powerful.
Very powerful. All right, well, I think we're going to stop at the dice now.
I'm really light and fluffy.
I know. I mean,
I'm a hell of a date.
I am feeling pretty light and fluffy today, but I also I like getting down deep in things. I don't know if this makes me weird or just me or whatever. I can listen to the saddest song and find hope and joy in it. And I like really sad, deep, emotional songs. And I will literally kind of come out of it doing, and people are like, what are you doing? But there, I don't know what it is, but I will say,
I get that.
Yeah, there's an artist named Damien Rice. I haven't thought about him in a while. Sad songs. I went to see him in concert, and he told jokes in between all of his sad songs. I'm like, my people, because I don't know the relationship between just the lightheartedness and that dark sadness. It felt like, yeah, here's a person that's gone through some stuff and appreciates it, but can see the other
lighten up. I do a full day workshop. I did that people won't come. Workshop called Shedding Light on the Sexual Abuse of Boys and the Men They Become.
Yeah, it's a tough one to come.
It's a full day light and fluffy workshop.
Yeah.
And I would crack jokes often in order to lighten it up. And I would have these women at the end just be enraged at me that I had humor. I said, this is so painful. I mean, you're all going to be slitting your wrist by the end of the day if I don't do something to lighten the atmosphere here. And I'm not making fun of the victims at all. It's mostly about myself.
I was going to say, I mean, you can relate. You have your own story and your own healing path. So, and you've found humor as a tool. So you're trying to show other people
you have to lighten up. That life is serious enough. You have to have some moments in there.
and probably, humor's interesting. It's a timing thing, right? So where you are in your growth, that's a tool that's really working well for you, and maybe someone else can't.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. They're just not there. And again,
and one's not better than the other.
I didn't beat them up or anything. It's just that was interesting information. It told me a lot about who they were and where they were, and that's just where they are.
Got it. All right. Well, so moving on, there's two more things that we get to do together.
Great.
We're really into it now. So I like talking about exceptional human encounters because this word exceptional, I don't know, it seems really grandiose. And but what I found when I sit with a guest and we talk about them, they're really just ordinary moments that somehow just a special little juiciness happens in them, and they're profound, they're meaningful. People get goosebumps, they walk away and go, that was just so meant for me. But it happens in just normal places. A lot of Uber rides, a lot of ride sharing examples have come up on the show. Because it's the one time in our culture right now that you're in an intimate setting, we have some intimacy issues, I think, in our culture, where we're just can't slow down enough. He's like, oh, where do I begin on that?
But can I say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
People don't know what intimacy is. This is one of those words like love and friendship that gets abused, but people don't really understand. So can I define intimacy?
Absolutely. Go for that.
Intimacy is the act of being vulnerable with another person. And on an airplane, if you're suddenly spilling your guts out to the person who can't get away from you, that is called a faux intimacy, because you're probably never going to see this person again. So you're not really taking a risk. Real intimacy is taking a risk and risking the possibility of being shamed, rejected, abandoned, voted off the island, whatever, so that you then, if they accept you, then the two of you get to a deeper level of connection. If they reject you, then it doesn't. And so that's what relationship is about. A long-term relationship, and especially a long-term sexual relationship, is about getting more and more naked with this other person and showing who you are and revealing who you are and taking the risk that they're going to say, get out.
Yeah.
But there's no great reward without great risk. Sorry, a teaching moment.
It is a worthy reminder, you know. So we're okay. So
sorry, I derailed things.
It's all right. So in the context of intimacy, well, let's just go back. So when I say exceptional human encounters, what comes up for you? What does that mean to you? Does an experience come up where you're like, yes, that's my definition of it. I experienced this and I define that as really exceptional. What comes up?
Two different things come up.
Okay.
One is in the book, actually. I talked about, I was with my ex. We were together 19 years, so I can call him an ex. And we were just grocery shopping one day, and all of a sudden I went into this moment of ecstasy. Because we were exactly where we were supposed to be, doing what we were supposed to be doing. The rightness of that profoundly moved through me, and the connection that we had in what was happening. So that's I think that's true happiness in my mind. And the other is people that I met, and one person in particular, there's actually two that come to mind, but I'm a Buddhist, and so it's when I meet someone that I've known before, and that what we would describe in this culture as a soulmate just means you've had a relationship with them before and you know them, and really, really know them. And so I've met two people in particular, besides my ex, who was one of those, who time stops, and I see him and he sees me, and the words don't even matter at that point because of the profoundness of the moment and the stretching across time. And so time ceased to exist. And there's nothing as delicious or powerful or profound or real as what happens in that moment.
Yeah. You have to have a little space after that. No, it's so... The moments happen in just life, and there's nothing like, if anybody was witnessing,
stumble across them.
Yeah, well, just if anybody was witnessing it, they wouldn't be able to describe what you just described, because it's something that just comes together, and you just get this rush of feeling, right?
It's like there's a knowingness in your body. It's like you're there, and there's nothing else. It's just that in that moment, and it's really incredible. I cherish those moments, and they've come up many times in my life, and some are more profound than others, depending on the depth, the number of lifetimes we spend together, the depth of the connection, and the intimacy that comes out of that. But it feeds the soul.
Definitely. Definitely helps us through. And that's why we talk about, I mean, honestly, I've gone back and forth on why I'm doing this show and doing it in the way that I do it. Definitely, I could have people on and we can talk about all the things that are wrong in the world. And it's not that I don't want to give those things an audience and stand up for what I believe in and have people talk about the things that they believe in and the injustices that they're working to correct. But I also feel very strongly that there's so much of that, and that we need some positive fuel. And there is positive fuel in the lightheartedness and the humor and the just basic human connection, slowing down, just being real and being in the moment with someone. And I hope that's what people see when they tune in. It's like, this is my fuel. Like, I get to do this every week, and it allows me to do everything else that I'm doing and work on my tough stuff. And if there's anything that I want people to get, it's just like, reach out to someone and have like a 55-minute conversation. Like, just sit down, slow down, and let that be the thing, the reason why you reach out. Not, oh, let's go try this new restaurant, or, put the phone away and just go, you know what? I want to see and connect with you, and I want to know what's going on. And I'm going to ask you questions. How amazing is that? And I want to hear your answers. That, I just feel with every part of me that's so important right now.
Yeah, because most of our life is cursory. Like, how are you? Fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
All right. Have a nice day.
Or
It was a
what do you
meaningful
do?
connection.
At first, like if I had a special superpower, I would want to wipe out the question. What do you do?
What do you do?
Oh, I would just destroy that question. I would send it out into an outer galaxy. It's just not a.
There's an old networking question that was, you ask, instead of asking what you do, you ask them, what good do you do?
What good do you do? I've been asking, and I encourage people to try this, and I know it's been a social challenge before, is I'll ask the same question I asked you at the beginning of the show. What has your attention right now? What's going on?
Exactly.
Like you just rush through rush hour to get to where you are. Like, tell me what's going on. And how you tell me that, I'm going to get a really good sense of who you are. And if you allow me to tell you what's pulling my attention right now, you're going to get a really good sense of who I am.
Absolutely.
And we have a better foundation to like ask more questions.
It's called intimacy. You took a risk.
Yeah.
You showed where you're at, and they're either going to like that or they're not.
Exactly.
That's okay.
Exactly. So speaking of social challenge, we are at the end of the show, and this is the last thing that we get to do together. So I like to issue a social challenge of the week. It's something that people can do. It's self-explorative. It's not me saying, this is what I did, and this is the experience I had. It's like, here's an opportunity for you to learn something about yourself. And then if you feel compelled, share that experience with me or a friend. You can do it in relation to each other. So I can't remember what I wrote down, but I always... usually I pull it from our conversation.
I have one.
You have one?
I'll give you one.
Okay, tell me.
Well, it's in the book, actually. There's an exercise that really, we don't stop in life too much. We don't stop to take inventory of where we are in this moment. And so I often encourage clients, and it's in the book, to stop 3 times a day.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
And go, what do I want? What do I need? What do I feel right now? What do I want? What do I need? What do I feel right now?
I love it. I love it. That's the perfect one. And if you feel like it's hard to remember to do that 3 times a day, set an alarm. That really works.
It does. I suggest people, your phone programming, we all are ubiquitous cell phones.
Yeah.
Set your alarm for 3 times a day. Do it more. But we don't stop because our attention is out there. And the real world is in here. And that's what the Unspoken Boundaries Workshop is, to teach you how to stay in here so that you really know what's going on. And the more you know what's going on in here, the more you're going to know what's going on out there.
And I will say, and I think you probably said this in the book, and I've done this before and I want to do it again, but at first it's going to be tough. Because if you haven't checked in and asked yourself, what do I need right now?
It's going to be hard.
You feel like, I don't know.
And
am I allowed to need something?
Exactly.
So it's going to be tough, but I love it. That is definitely the social challenge of the week. I'm going to find what page it's on, make sure, and write it out word
It's
for
fairly
word.
early in the book, as I recall.
It's very early in the book. It's very early in the book.
It's a long
And you bring
book.
it up again.
I do. I beat it to death.
Okay, love it. That's it. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the show.
Thank you so much. I've had a great time.
This was fun, huh?
It
It goes by fast. It was fun. We went to some deep places, but those are important places to go to. So I'm really thankful that he had a 2-hour commute to get here. Like, I'm really glad that you made the trip.
It was well worth it.
Yeah. And I'll be sharing all the ways that you can get a hold of Merle. And yeah, that brings us to the end of the show. I thank you for tuning in. If you take the social challenge, I'd love to hear about it. He'd love to hear about it too.
Absolutely.
I know. I will share all of his social media. It's Love Yost in most places, right?
Yeah, Love Yost is Twitter and Instagram and Facebook.
Facebook, I think so. So if you take it, let us know. And in the meantime, I just encourage you to think about this question. What are you doing today to make an exceptional encounter happen? See you next week.